Oh, there we are. Good afternoon, good morning, good evening, wherever you might be in the world. My internet's coming and going this evening, so I may not be here long. But good day to Nicola, Jonathan, and Bruce. And let's jump straight in. Let's jump straight in with a topic that I immediately call my aviation lawyer chum, who will never answer questions appropriately because he's a lawyer, Jonathan. But this morning, all over social media, early hours or late last night in America, early hours of the morning for me, a thing dropped through from the FAA telling us about what was it titled? The mandatory briefing item, pro duty operational personnel, section 349 SUS implementation due 16th of May. Basically says don't fly in controlled airspace, or you can't get a permission from air traffic anymore. And a lot of people have started saying it's false, it's fake. So I thought I'd ask Jonathan, do you think first off, Jonathan, do you think that looks like a fake document?
I emailed some people and it was confirmed to me that it was legitimate.
Well, that's probably the best lawyerly answer you've ever given. That's brilliant. Okay,
Yes.
that's cool. So that's that's words anyway. So that's coming in on Friday then, and I don't think it's unexpected really to change the way in which recreational flyers talk to our traffic controllers. What's your thoughts on it, Jonathan?
That we knew this was coming because the FAA Reauthorization Act of 2018 had Section 349, which actually takes this and actually puts it in the United States Code, and it lays out specifically what you have to do to fly in this almost protected class. So remember, we had the Section 336 group of protected people. Then there was the whole Taylor lawsuit. Then Part 101 came out. We still have Part 101. But if you were flying recreationally, you need to not look at Part 101. You need to look at this Section 44809 and read all of that, because that's actually the law now. The FAA is going to have to update Part 101, which is regulations. They're going to have to go through the regulatory process to update that. But 44809 is out there. And if you read it, it has 8 requirements. So you have aircraft is flown strictly for recreational purposes. The aircraft is operated in accordance with or within the programming of a community-based organization's set of safety guidelines that are developed in coordination with the Federal Aviation Administration. 3, the aircraft is flown within the visual line of sight of a person operating the aircraft or a visual observer located and in direct communication with the operator. So now we can do FPV racing, right? Which was the whole problem before. So, there's at least been that correction. 4, the aircraft is operated in a manner that does not interfere with and gives way to any manned aircraft. 5, Bravo, Charlie, Delta, and Echo 2 airspace. You actually have to obtain an authorization prior to operating there. And that's what this entire memo is it's merely the implementation of one of these 8 provisions.
And at the end of the day, am I right in thinking that it'll be the Lance system that users will go to?
Yes.
that's more like it. That's one of your normal answers. And for those people that don't know, that is sort of an app-based system, and the sky's gridded up. You go to an app and say, "Hey, I'd like to fly here," and it says yes or no. Is that about the bottom line of it? Have you got a course on that, Jonathan?
I have an airspace course on this topic, which I've been waiting for this all to come out, because I was actually going to try to create the courses so as to fulfill the requirements of this. So you could kind of knock out your 107 related training as well as your recreational training as well. We're still waiting for what's going to come out for the aeronautical knowledge and safety test. And I suspect that's going to be a bunch of information in Advisory Circular 9157 Bravo, which is also going to come out. We should expect something in a Federal Register announcement, probably some emails, and also the website, in addition to this memo. And is this going to happen on, I think it was the 17th?
Yeah,
maybe
Friday, isn't it? Something like 16th, 17th, something like that. There was 2 sort of big reactions that I saw online to this, or that was a similar path all over the place. Reaction number A was, this must be a fake memo. Where's this guy got it from? It's rubbish. Which, as you say, you've already confirmed that it is the real deal. And the second reaction, which I saw more than once, was, and again, this is a question for you that I hope you can answer. People were saying, well, I'll tell you what, why don't we just get off Facebook and get off everything like that? And if we never see these announcements, we never have to abide by them. Perhaps you could unpack whether that's truthful or not.
Well, it looks like I should probably get some sunglasses, because the future for doing a drone criminal defense is going to be looking bright. So yeah, that's not going to be a great idea. Yeah, no, that ignorance of the law is not a defense. Walking out into a road with your eyes closed is not going to make the car go away. Same way here, it's not going to make the FAA go away, especially since you're commenting on it on Facebook. And I guess, yes, it would be hard for the FAA to maybe prove that you were on notice. But the thing is you're supposed to do your due diligence as a United States citizen to actually check the law, right? Ignorance of the law is not a defense.
And that's across everything, isn't it? Everything in life. It's not just this particular topic.
Yeah, generally. I mean, it's
some delays, Jonathan, today.
Yeah, I had a mute. I was just turning on and off. Yes, yes.
So no, really, at the end of the day,
you do have.
Go on, mate. Go on.
Well, I mean, everybody's on notice at this point right now. So, I mean, everyone has the ability to look it up, and ignorance of the law is not a defense. And if the FAA wants to come after you, they will. And so, one thing that does kind of bother me, though, is the rogueness of the drone industry, as is it's never like, hey, let's go try to actually mobilize to lobby to do something. Instead, it's like, let's put our fingers in our ears and run away. Unfortunately.
Yeah, I think that's an entirely international problem. I think that happens absolutely everywhere. And the trouble is, we have been saying this. We said before we started, I think, Bruce, you've been chatting here for a couple of years. We've been definitely saying the same sort of thing for at least 2 years. Come on, let's get together and let's try and have a unified voice. And it's just never going to happen. And unfortunately, I think big business has come in, people that have never flown anything before or aren't of an aviation bent, and they've come in and they just see dollar signs and they want to move stuff out of the way. This sort of things happen in the UK already, the similar system where you have to electronically announce your intention to fly, and then that gets handed off to air traffic control. So that's not unusual there. It's probably going to end up happening all around the world. And I think the thing that's really going to upset the AMA is that you're now called a limited recreational flyer, which is, you're no longer an aero modeler, you are a limited recreational flyer. I think people get very upset about that. I don't know, Bruce, did you want to speak to this topic at all?
No, but I'd just like to remind people that Jonathan's advice should not be construed as legal advice in the context of this broadcast.
Yeah, that's right. So should you have a card or something that you hold up, Jonathan? Or maybe you should have a disclaimer across your face.
Yes.
To the point. Oh, look at that. How concise can you be?
Yeah.
Opinions expressed are not binding.
Yeah. There's lots of nonsense going on all around the world. And I think you mentioned, haven't you got some nonsense coming your way as well now, Bruce?
Yeah, we do. I mean, it's interesting that the hobby is being increasingly marginalised and nothing is changing. It's getting worse and worse. Here in New Zealand, there are some changes coming up to our Civil Aviation Act, and it's in the form of a bill at the moment that's being presented to the Parliament. And there are some very subtle but very important changes going on. For example, in the past, the pilot in command has been defined as the pilot on board an aircraft. But now that we have unmanned aircraft, they've changed that definition to include the pilot in command maybe on the ground in the case of an unmanned aircraft. And so there's a couple of documents online, which I'll link to in a video I'm going to put up fairly shortly, in which they have the new bill, which will become the Act, And then they have a consultation discussion paper, which is really interesting because they talk about drones. Now, previously, they haven't talked drones, they've talked RPAS, but now they're talking drones. They're bringing the slang into it, and it's, I'm getting a bit worried about it. And they also want the right to be able to shoot down drones. And this is, I find also interesting because they want to give themselves the right to bring down a drone if it poses a threat to aviation or public safety. Yet, strangely enough, there seems to be little concern about where that drone may end up. I mean, if there's a drone near an airport, they want to be able to shoot it down using RF methods or nets or whatever. But what about the people underneath? If we can't fly over people because it's considered too dangerous. In fact, in New Zealand, you can't fly over a grassy field in the middle of nowhere without the permission of the property owner because, as I've been told by CAA, there may be risks there that you're unaware of. If that's too dangerous to fly over a grassy paddock in the middle of nowhere without permission, how can they possibly consider shooting down a drone in what's going to be an urban or suburban area because it might pose a threat to aviation? And would they also allow the shooting down of a Cessna 172 if it was flying over a sports stadium or something, dropping leaflets and therefore a threat to public safety? It's like this, we're getting more and more regulations stacked against unmanned aviation, and there's no parity with manned aviation anymore. We're getting to become even more regulated. It's not really good enough. So I think these are things that are going to have to be looked at very carefully, and it's the whole world is changing like this. We're just getting more and more marginalized, sidelined. I get really concerned.
Interesting that you're using the word drone. That is definitely changed, just to allow people to understand what they're talking about.
Yeah, but I mean, like previously they've used RPAS, and I mean, drone. It's like when we look at manned aircraft, you've got helicopters, you've got powered, you've got unpowered. But when it comes to the world of unmanned aircraft, there's just drones. There's no, and there's a broader range of aircraft in the unmanned spectrum than there is in the manned spectrum. So how can we possibly have just one term to cover them all when in the manned aviation community we've got all these different variants of manned aircraft which have certain types of things, like helicopters have certain different rules to fixed wing, which have different rules to gliders, in terms of giving away and so forth. But in unmanned aviation, we're all the same. We're all just evil.
I noticed on the shooting down path in America. I wish I should have thought about that before I started talking. But yes. There was a concert or something where they were using some jamming technology, and the FAA's got a bit upset about it. And this last week they've said we're a bit upset about that.
Yeah, I think the FCC probably got upset because it was a breach of the federal laws the FCC maintain over radio spectrum. And also that's the same is going to apply in New Zealand. If the CAA think they can go out and shoot down drones with jammers, well, I'm sorry, but there's several things wrong with that. The first thing is they don't have permission to do that from the people that manage the radio spectrum side of things. So they're going to be in breach of other laws. You can't have one law that violates another law. So it's going to have to require a change to other regulations as well. But more importantly, how are you going to bring a drone down? Are you going to jam its systems because it could be on a wide range of frequency? Are you going to spoof the GPS? If you're going to spoof the GPS, that doesn't seem to be a very clever thing to do at an airport where there's lots of GPS-based navigation. So no one's thought this through, really. It's like it's a knee-jerk reaction, or everyone else overseas is doing it. We need to do it too. And I'm so disappointed that we're leading from behind.
Well, but the reality there is nobody is actually doing it because there is not a country. Well, that's not true. It's happening in sandy countries where people are catching lead. That's where it's happening. That's where it's happening, but for different reasons. But nobody anywhere in the world is doing it live and for real for exactly the same reason. Is that it just tramples over all sorts of RF protocols, and you just don't do it. One of the reasons, I know you can buy the GPS jammers off eBay, and I know the popular use case for them down here is to disrupt cash in transit vehicles who send back their positions and things like that to their base, and that's one of the things that they put. So it disrupts they also use them to disrupt timestamps. Some ATMs use them for timestamps, GPS apparently, and it disrupts the ATMs timestamps as well. So they are used for nefarious means already. So you definitely can't allow it. It's
not unprecedented though, because how many prisons have cell phone jamming systems?
Yes, that's true. That's true, but they must carve out ways of doing that in the law. And I guess one of the first ways they'll do it is you could build that in a Faraday cage style. You could build a little bit of jamming into your building. They do in trains, don't they? They have the window. They put the film on train windows to do exactly that. So a passive method, I suppose they call that. I don't know. Rather than that, with their wording as to how they were going to do it. Can they make vision?
Yeah, and this jamming must work because it's being used against the US military drones in Iraq, isn't it?
Yes, they've. Well, I think how was that report worded? That was reported, they're having operational difficulties because of
electromagnetic interference.
Yes, that's right. What are we doing with that, Jonathan?
Was that legal?
No, I was reading that article as well, and I was like, this is an interesting point because with the counter, because this morning I was going over what was happening over in Saudi Arabia with that Yemeni was it the Houthi rebels were that attacked 2 pumping stations with some drones, and so I was looking all that up, and then so you have this whole situation that's starting to brew, right? And typically overseas, we see a lot of this happening, right? Where you have like the ISIS guys that dropped the drone on the Syrian ammo dump. All sorts of stuff has happened in Iraq. And so you see, as people are going to try to counter those, right, then you're going to have jamming coming about. On top of that, you already have very limited bandwidth because there's a lot of unmanned aircraft operations happening in certain areas. So you have the bandwidth is getting filled, as well as you having jamming going on, and potentially have legal jamming as well as illegal jamming. And you have to coordinate all that, and it's getting people to start wondering, like, this is the future of warfare, where you'll have unmanned aircraft attacking unmanned aircraft. And one great example is the article I was writing this morning was that you had the Hamas fire kites and fire balloons that they were launching those over to the Israelis. And then the Israelis countered with FPV racer drones that basically crash into the fire kites. And they have YouTube videos of this. So now you have unmanned aircraft attacking unmanned aircraft, and you can automatically smell this is like World War II again, where, right, we go from battleships to aircraft carriers, and now we're going to go from now we're going to go to stuff that launches lots of drones against everyone else. And then you have midair drone collisions where then everyone's going to jam, completely denied environments. So you're going to go back to INS, and you're going to have ways to communicate. And so it's changing warfare as we start seeing it. This is just the beginning of it. And then people on the periphery are going to have to start paying attention as to what's going on, because you have the illegal drone uses, jamming going on, as well as the legitimate military jamming that does go on around the United States, and that people that are flying recreationally or commercially should be aware of that and learn how to check for that, or at least recognize the symptoms of that if it is happening to you. Because, if you have GPS using it, if you're using that for your return to home feature, that's kind of it's a safety feature you need to be aware of, that manned aircraft we never had to deal with, right? But it's more of a drone only kind of problem that's over there. So yeah, that's why I was laughing when you now said that about that article.
Yeah, it's off the shelf obvious that that's going to happen, and especially as it's not so many years past that all the video transmissions from the main big US military UPAs were unencrypted in the open standard video signals and feeds that were just being watched like the television. So yeah, I think it speaks a little bit to the what does it speak to? It speaks to people thinking, how can anyone have the technology to beat our wonderful systems where they're infallible? And they didn't, right from day one, they didn't build in as much robustness and hardness as they would have done into an equivalent size fighter or similar aircraft. And we're learning now. Quite what I think the attack you were referring to was in Saudi Arabia or whatever it was, Jonathan. I think that was a couple of Russian machines, I think, used for that, which would have just been bought off the shelf, not Russian. Russian would have g'day XJet. That's happening twice. So yeah, there was nothing special about that. I think was that what they were used for. That was the H-tail things.
I couldn't. I was trying to find out the exact type of aircraft that was used, because they said that there were 7 aircraft that were unmanned aircraft that were used, which resulted in only minor damage to one of the pumping stations. Nobody was hurt, and that was it. One of the other statements said that the drones were booby trapped. So I'm not sure if this was like a situation back to like Venezuela, right, where you put the bomb on the drone, you fly it over and it explodes, or whether this was a drone that was delivering some type of payload like a mortar or something and dropping it, and you were able to recover the aircraft. I'm not sure. I was unable to find any information on that.
I saw some that they shot down recently, or when they say shot down, that quite often means landed early because they ran out of fuel or whatever else, rather than shot down. I think they look like, I think they're called Orkuts or something like that, and they are they're swan or something like that in Russian, and they're like 2 a penny. They're everywhere over there, absolutely everywhere. Like the Bixler of the Russian drone world. And yeah, cheapest chips to buy from your local Russian buy your drone events. so it's not surprising, really, is it? And it's must be leveling the playing field in sandy war situations somewhat, sadly. No. Yes. No.
Well,
no.
I mean, if you have an unguarded asset, or you have an ammo dump in the middle of a stadium, so yes and no. It has to hit the right targets. So then it's a game of, hide targets or protect them.
Oh no, well, a matter of how much cash you've got, isn't it? Because if you've got enough cash to buy enough of them, then one of them will get through. I would have thought. Anyway, let us move along. What else? This nasty subject. What else have we seen? Have we done enough of your thing over there with this shoot down? So what else were they proposing, Bruce?
That's pretty much also confiscation. They'll be able to seize any aircraft, including unmanned aircraft, if they think that you or the aircraft pose a threat to public safety or the safety of the airspace. So basically, if you're flying down the park and the delegated enforcement officer, which could be PC Plod, who's no idea about drones, comes along, if someone's complained to him, oh, that person's, endangering me with their drone, the PC Plod could come on and say, look, under section so-and-so of the Civil Aviation Act, I'm seizing this drone, and you've got to prove to me that you should be getting it back. So that is a worrying thing, because we don't have guarantees that the enforcement people will have more than half a clue, because the people making the regulations don't have half a clue. So how would the enforcement people know better? That is all kind of a worry. Apart from that, at least we're not as bad as Sri Lanka.
Well, what's happened in Sri Lanka?
Sri Lanka has banned all unmanned aviation.
And they had that big terror attack, didn't they? And they found half a dozen phantoms, didn't they, in the bedroom of the people?
Yeah, but we've just discovered that even in Saudi Arabia, where they've got access to all these much better drones, they can't blow up a pumping station. So what's the risk from a few Phantom 4s?
Always one way of looking at it, I suppose. But I can kind of understand that. Not such an knee-jerk reaction. I did want to look back. I was thinking then the idea of piloting command. And again, Jonathan's here. It's going to be terrible getting an answer out, Jonathan, on this one. Is New Zealand just closing a loophole? Because I can't think what the definition is here, nor in England, or I know they're also quite well in both. What's the definition in the US for the operator or piloting command responsibilities?
Simply speaking, it's the individual that's going to be responsible for the flight. So anything happens, they're the one that the FAA is going to come after for an enforcement action.
But with everyone around the world has been using the word operator, I think, and I'm interested in as why if New Zealand's using the term pilot in command.
Yeah. Well, so Part 107, so you're bringing up a great question here. That there was some confusion caused by the NPRM with the FAA a while back. They actually used the term operator as opposed to remote pilot. And I guess there's some issues on, whether these people are pilots, are they not pilots, what are they? And the FAA ended up actually changing that to actually saying they're remote pilots. And one of the reasons why was there was confusion, because there are operators which have operating certificates which have or have pilots that fly underneath them. So you have your like Part 137 operators that are doing agricultural aircraft operations, or air carriers that are, like Delta or American Airlines or something like that are flying. Those are operators, they're an entity, multiple aircraft, multiple people, and then you have the actual pilots themselves. So they didn't want to have an operator, and you're like, well, which operator? Are we talking about like drone operator or operator of like the manned aircraft? And so they just switched to the terminology remote pilot. So I believe that's the reason. That's one probably reason why is they're harmonize that across the different regulatory schemes.
Yeah,
it's interesting. Yeah, because in the UK they've also got this separation between pilot and operator, and who is responsible. I watched a video the other day by someone, and the thing is that the operator is responsible for the drone and the flight. But does that mean if someone is a pilot and they do something bad, they're not liable anymore because they're not the operator? If the drone is owned by somebody else, in the situation where the drone is owned by somebody but flown by someone else, who is the responsible party in the event of someone breaching the regulations? It's very, very messy.
Yes, it's the act of when a manned aircraft, you get into the airplane and you're plainly the driver, and so in a certain extent, it's up to you to accept an aircraft that's airworthy and all those other good things. So in the blame chain, when it comes down, if your aircraft is defective and Jonathan, correct me on this, but you still your neck is further in the noose, and the person that owns the thing, if you accept an aircraft and fly it and you have a problem as a result of that.
Yeah, I mean, the regulations specifically, if you want the actual answer, it's pilot in command means a person who, one, has the final authority and responsibility for the operation and safety of the flight, two, has been designated as pilot in command before or during the flight, and three, holds the appropriate category, class, and type rating, if appropriate, for the conduct of the flight. And so that is the guy that the FAA is going to be coming after in the event of some type of non-compliance. If there's an accident, that's the guy everyone's going to be calling.
Yeah, exactly. Even if he's some youngster under the huge pressure to go flying, under huge commercial pressure, they'll still come after him. And all he was trying to do was keep his job. I know it's no excuse, but it's always struck me as a little bit unfair. So I guess it's just roundly putting the remote pilot in New Zealand in that position, right? Even if his boss has told him to go off and fly and the weather's horrible, or that he's not read a NOTAM or whatever, his neck's definitely on the block. But yes, there's definitely a lot of confusion around the world.
Yeah, it raises an interesting point though, because at least in the USA, it is the person holding the relevant qualification. If I heard Jonathan correctly, the relevant qualification to fly the craft. What about countries like New Zealand, where no qualification is required? You can, if you're a recreational flyer, you don't need any qualification. So, can you be a pilot in command?
Well, can you be a pilot in command, Jonathan?
Yeah, well, you're gonna have to dive into the ultimately the regulations here. I mean, the problem is we're using different. There's a lot of synonyms, and then we use them all interchangeably, and then the regulatory authorities have they mean one thing, and then we might use it synonymously, but the regulatory authorities don't. I mean, prime example is look at exemptions, authorizations, and waivers, and everyone uses that interchangeably, yet they're three distinct different things with different people approving with different standards. And so really when it boils down to it, when you get into the regulations, you need to look specifically at those terms and find out, are those terms defined anywhere? What does the regulatory agency mean by those, and just not assume and read into those terms, because while they may use it in certain places with manned aircraft, do they use that terminology consistently with unmanned aircraft, or is there a different flavor of that they kind of read into it? For congested area, for instance, with manned aircraft, you have congested areas, right? If you're going to be crash landing your aircraft in that area, you don't really have anywhere to land, right? So there's certain extra restrictions applied to operations over those areas. But for unmanned aircraft, is that applied the same way, or are we just defining it with different resolution? And so you guys really need to dive into what's the actual terminology being used, and has that agency or that governmental entity actually defined it, and not just assume it. They might have not, and some of these issues they probably haven't even thought of, and we're probably bringing them up for the first time.
Yeah, congested area is definitely a hot potato wherever you are in the world, and exactly how to define it. And I can't help thinking we're getting, or regulators getting in knickers in a knot to help out our PAS users and making things cloudier and muddier almost every day, the distances you can operate and things like that. Was it the EU one? I think it was the EU one. That's saying now if you are flying at 100 meters, then you must have a 100-meter barrier around your aircraft. If you're flying at 200 meters, you must have a 200-meter safety barrier, as it were, at all times around the RPAS. There's going to be no end of confusion if we continue going down this sort of road.
Yeah, just speaks to the level of over-regulation we're looking at. When you consider that 95% of all this RPAS traffic, people playing with planes in a park on a Sunday afternoon.
Yeah, I feel very, very sorry for the model aircraft world at the moment. It's no good at all. It's no good at all. Jonathan, is there anything else in America we haven't spoken before that's worrying you at the moment, or caught your eye, or think we should keep an eye on?
Not really. I mean, this stuff coming out here with the FAA, I think it's going to be the most interesting. Looking at the new Advisory Circular 9157 Bravo, that's going to be very interesting. And then seeing what entities are going to be coming out with the information for the aeronautical knowledge and safety test, right? Because it actually says that the FAA that it can be delivered electronically, as well as they can actually designate a community-based organization, as well as, I believe, individuals to deliver that. So I'm kind of wondering like how that's actually going to be done, and is there going to be like a Academy Model Aeronautics version of this ready to be popped up instantaneously that they've been working on for a long time, because the FAA has been collaborating with them, and that was part of an overall plan by the AMA, for a while. Which I'm wondering to see how quickly they have something pop up, because then it'd be like, aha. But so that's the one I'm paying attention to right now, is how difficult that test will be, as opposed to just flying in controlled airspace.
And I guess you'll be ready to or as ready as you can be with your limited knowledge of what's been going on in the background to pop a course up that speaks to that.
Yes. I mean, well, yeah, I'm working on that right now with just the manned aircraft stuff. And this is going to be interesting, actually, trying to get recreational guys up to speed with manned aviation, and how to even like learn about the airspace, right? And where to fly and where not to fly. And you can automatically say, hey, don't fly close to airports, right, guys? We all understand that, right? But when you look at these sectional charts, there's all sorts of interesting things that do pop up that aren't really being talked about, such as the restricted areas. You have the prohibited areas in certain locations. You also have the 99.7 flight restrictions that are also in effect. You have Part 93 with the special flight rules areas, like Grand Canyon, for instance, that people don't even know about, or have never even heard of, or know even where to look those up, and what's the applicability of those, right? Like Niagara Falls is one of them, for example, and so is Grand Canyon and the Hudson River over there by New York City. And so it's going to be interesting to make that course, to boil that down low enough without messing it up, if that makes any sense. What's the irreducible complexity of all of that to where you can communicate it accurately without messing up that information? So the FAA is going to have a hard time trying to do that with people.
All of this really comes down to enforcement, as again we've been saying for the last couple of years. There's no point in doing any of this if there's no enforcement. So then I guess it's going to be how all of this is promulgated to local police forces and things like that, and for them to jump on it. And maybe in some ways it won't be such a bad thing if some other misdemeanor flying that happens gets jumped on.
Yeah, so that's actually a good point. I was like thinking, I know that people are they're bummed about this, but the flip side is that it actually says in for 7, that the operator has passed an aeronautical knowledge and safety test described in subsection G and maintains proof of test passage to be made available to the administrator or law enforcement upon request. So it'd be very interesting to see how that goes forth, as well as registration and marking. You're supposed to give that over to the FAA or law enforcement upon request. So that's one way they could start trying to grab individuals on the ground. Now, does that get the drone in the sky, right? Then you're going to have to figure out how you're going to wrangle with that, remote ID or something. But at least this gives way law enforcement can go after the individuals on the ground and try to get them. Now, prosecution of this is going to be have to be ironed out by the FAA. And furthermore, do they even have the bandwidth to start doing this, or do they care, right? Because, you know, they're dealing with all sorts of other bigger problems where people are dying and stuff is going on versus this. And then so what happens is those bigger problems are kind of addressed, and this is the thing that keeps getting pushed on the back burner, and the industry suffers overall. The lawful, at least, suffer, while the illegals benefit.
Yes. So do you think, to a certain extent, I mean, we work in a society where the fear of the law is sometimes worse than the act itself. So, you know, people will be worried, and then they won't, perhaps they'll be less likely to do something. And maybe that's what they're hoping to do with all this. And I suppose people saying on Facebook, well, we'll leave Facebook so we don't hear about it. There are going to be an awful lot of people that won't have a clue that this is happening on Friday. I shudder to think how many people will be aware of the change on Friday.
Yeah, but
it happens.
Yeah, but I mean, yeah, there's that group, but then there's the actual group of people that the FAA is actually catching that do know that they're not flying in compliance with their waivers or whatever else, and then the FAA's enforcement is just incredibly lax. So it's not like, I mean, we're kind of discussing, you know, oh, there's some fruit might be hard to get. It's like, well, there's lots of fruit already on the ground, and the FAA is actively picking up the fruit, and the Office of Inspector General's office at the Department of Transportation, they made this one point that was just shocking, and how the FAA actually caught this guy breaking the regulations, and that ended up with, I believe, just a warning letter, and that was it. And it was like, okay, so you literally had the bad fruit, if you will, on, you know, that you picked up off the ground in your hand, and then you just dropped it again. So it's really also an agency problem as well. I mean, they're at least putting more tools in their tool belt to do something with, as well as local law enforcement. But we're still going to need agency to come in and actively prosecute these things, which, you know, at what point does the drone industry start getting upset and start saying, hey, at least do we want to have some type of unpreemptive measure, where, because specifically with the federal aviation regulations, I mean, not the regulations, but the statutes, there's actually a provision in there that says for certain types of crimes, these are not preempted. Like for certain types of like forgery of aircraft registration and stuff, it actually says like, hey, states, you can go after these type of guys. And so I'm wondering, at what point do you then have a situation where you have,
Just unpack, what do you mean by, what does that mean, preemptive? Just explain that bit to me.
So for aviation is a field preempted area, and that it's meaning that how our Constitution works is that the federal law is the supreme law of the land, and it trumps state law. And so we're an area of area so heavily regulated that courts infer that Congress left nothing for the states to actually regulate. And so since aviation has been so regulated, there was a provision put in the federal aviation statutes which would de-preempt, basically saying, hey, states, you can create laws regarding the prosecution of the criminalization of these types of crimes, and it listed things such as like aircraft, I believe, or forgery and stuff like that. So you could see a situation here being up where then the federal government might say, hey, when it comes to prosecuting individuals for under local law for lack of currently not possessing your aircraft registration or your certificate, that would be permissible and not preempted. So you could see where but then that's playing back to the whole problem that a lot of the people here in the United States are wondering is, what is the lawful authority of the states versus the feds? Because sometimes the feds drop the ball. And the one great example, we had to deal with this in the United States also not that long ago, was with immigration down on the southern border, where the Obama administration was not doing much. So much of some of the states were actually coming in and actually trying to enforce immigration. And so what ended up happening is the United States Supreme Court struck it down, and it was basically like, hey, even if you had carbon copied that law, you cannot apply it because the application with the different actual criminalization of it would be inconsistent with Congress's provisions, right? So feds might do like a fine or criminalization. The states might do it for a different amount, and so it's incompatible. So it's not unique. Just aviation. Immigration's another issue that has to deal with this as well. When the feds drop the ball to a completely preempted area, then the states want to come in and fix the problem, but do they have the lawful authority to do that? And could we create something like de-preempting certain provisions, such as this registration or licensing? I don't know. It's something to think about, so as to bring in the illegal operators that we end up all getting punished for.
Gary, wake up. To me. Has he gone to sleep?
He was so moved by it. He was so moved by it.
So deep in contemplation.
I'm always deep in contemplation. That's what I do. I hang on Jonathan's every word, because if I get some out of them, it's very unusual. Well, it's going to be interesting to see how all this unpacks and what, if we had a crystal ball, what model aviation would look like in 10 years' time, if it still exists at all. Smooth Virus tells us in the comments that the AMA has responded to the release of the FAA memo. So that does confirm what Jonathan says, that it was indeed real. So hang on, there is a link just appeared in the comments. So I'm busy opening this, what is in fact breaking. Dear members, some of you may be aware of a recent FAA memorandum. So it's in the comments, dear viewer. Contact the FAA, and it says, Jonathan says we've stitched up the training. That's what it says, isn't it? Something like that.
Just something on the UK situation. I saw a really good video from a channel called On the Kitchen Table, and it's a guy, he's interviewed Jonathan Nicholson, the Deputy Director of Communications for the CAA, about the drone registration scheme. He's asked him some really...
Just careful what you say, because Jonathan may come on next week.
Okay.
He couldn't come on today.
Yep.
His daughter's taken some tests.
Jonathan gave some interesting answers, which the interviewer didn't challenge, unfortunately, because I'd like to challenge some of them. But he hinted very strongly that this is a precursor to a UTM, and that they want to register everyone. So when the UTM is introduced, you can have a transponder on your model aircraft or your drone or whatever, and obviously at further expense. So he's hinted at thin end of the wedge strategy on that, which is kind of worrying. And there was also this whole thing that, oh no, the interviewer said, well, what are we getting for our money? You know, if you're a fisherman, you get access to streams or something, or some sort of thing. And if you're different licenses grant you. If you've got a driver's license, you're granted the right to use the roads. What are you granted when you register your drone and get that? And the guy said, oh, well, this, you've got the right to use, compared it to paragliders. Paragliders, they don't pay any registration, but they can use the airspace. So what's going on? And the way he put it was basically, you can still use the airspace if you're not registering your drones or as a flyer. And I thought, well, hang on, no, you can't, because you get fined. So there's a few things I'd like to ask this gentleman, and basically follow up on the questions that this interviewer asked. But anyone that's interested, go and have a look. It's On the Kitchen Table is the YouTube channel. So just type in On the Kitchen Table drone and you'll find the interview. And it's really worth watching.
Yeah, I had a long chat with him at Farnborough, Jonathan, in 2014. I think it was and he had very sensible viewpoints, and I came away, having watched that one, thinking, yeah, I remember the conversations we had, and I can't help feeling he's been being pushed into a corner that he wasn't expected to go into by various people.
He was also very quick, as bureaucrats are, to unload responsibility. Or the government made that decision, nothing to do with me. And so, yeah, he's a very skilled bureaucrat.
Oh no. not just because he's my on, but I think I'll take his corner a little bit. Because you know that the UTM, or really what they're calling in the UK, is the FINS, isn't it? Flight Information Notification Scheme. I think I got that abbreviation right. And that will be as simple as, you may not need to have a device as just a transponder on the aircraft, as just notifying your flight via the NATS app or Altitude Angels, or Guardian Angel, whatever it's called, and then doing it electronically that way.
This is silly because I mean, I don't use a smartphone, and so why will I then be forbidden to fly because I choose not to have a smartphone? Why is there another hurdle to my flying? I've got to go and buy a smartphone. I've got to go and buy a data plan so I can use these apps. And I'm just doing something I've been doing for 50 plus years. Why am I suddenly being burdened with all these costs? And the whole thing is a little bit, as I say, it's just getting worse and worse. And I'm trying to think of, what did he say? There was something. Oh yeah, he said this is more than a registration scheme in the UK. It also includes the whole education and training. And I'm thinking, well, hang on, because he also said, oh yes, we educate and train the paragliders. And I'm thinking, well, hang on, they get it for free. So why are drone users having to pay for the same service? There's no parity there.
Yeah, I think they probably have been a little bit surprised by the reaction of the model aviation community in the UK, and some very sensible questions that are being thrown at them. So I don't think it's going to happen as easily as they hoped for the Friday afternoon release.
I'm going to lead a boycott registration movement. Boycott the registration program. Just stick to your sub 250 craft for a few months after registration comes in, so you don't have to register. You're not going to break the law. But if they only get 20,000 people registering, it's going to cost £90 a year, and the rest of those 20,000 people will say, I'm not having this. So then no one will register, and problem solved.
Yeah. But we know that straight away where Australia's got 100 grams, we know that 250 gram will magically be caught. It'll be gone on before long. I can't see that being allowed, that loophole being around for long. And I can't see anybody making any manufacturer really wanting to make many more models, or whatever type, that weigh more than 250 grams soon.
Which brings another interesting topic. I see DJI are about to release a new Spark. Will it be sub 250?
Spark.
Well, that would be fairly impressive if it still has 3-axis gimbal stabilization in 4K. Or whatever that one had. No, the Spark tomorrow's an action cam.
But tomorrow's an action cam that they're releasing, isn't it?
Yeah, well, DJI are releasing an action cam, which means it's probably going to be electronically stabilized. So I'm wondering whether there's some tie in there. Maybe they've got electronic stabilization good enough that the new Spark will use electronic stabilization and be under 250 grams, and suddenly they'll open up a huge new market. If I was DJI, that's what I'd be pushing for.
Yeah, I think you're right. Is it me cutting in and out, or is everyone else cutting in and out?
It's only you, Gary.
It's only me. Oh, that's all right then. Well, if I do cut out, just keep talking. I think sub 250 is going to be utterly that the regulators won't like it when everyone gets sub 250 and super capable machines. And if DJI do that, they'll do a very, very, very good job of it. That thing I was flying, I don't even know what I'd done with it for review. That was okay, but not fantastic. That's under sub 250, and it would only take a little bit more work, and it'd be a very capable machine. So it's definitely there. Smooth virus, I'm interested to say the memorandum was not for public distribution. Well, it got itself right around the internet very, very quickly this morning. So not. And Mad RC that would make a massive amount of sense based on all the noises from government and regulations. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know what's happening with the hobby. I just don't know. It's going away. That's what's happening. Anyway, Nicola, let's get Nicola back. If he's head down, I don't know whether he's paused or whether I'm paused now. If he is back, have you found the plane, Nicola? Have you found the plane?
Give me a second.
He's looking for it now.
Wow. He's
No,
going
had
to
to
pull it from the shelf and say, there it
Yeah.
is.
No, had to move something loud and noisy away from the screen. No, I haven't looked for it because this weekend I was finally busy flying the Zocht Talon GT Rebel.
I just need to. I need to. Oh, Jonathan's gone. I was going to say goodbye to him, but we just left anyway. So you carry on with the GT.
Oh, you're taking too long, Gary.
Yes. You tell me about the Zox. Tell me about Zox. Is that the one Bruce flew?
Yeah. To be completely honest, I haven't watched anybody's reviews yet, and for a good reason. I like to go unbiased into a build and the review, and only after I'm done with that do I watch other people's opinions on it, because a lot of people can say a lot of stuff, and somebody already mentioned that some reviewers were not quite happy about one thing or another, didn't really go into details. I didn't really care because I'm absolutely fascinated by this plane. I flew it 2 times. There was a slight issue at the end of the second flight, in the form of some magnets deciding to come loose from the motor, but apparently that's a known issue and they're working on it, and that's only happened to a handful of units, so not a big deal. I'm not really, yeah.
All right. Actually, every review I've seen, I think.
Well, that's just still 10 people out of 1,000 planes they claim they've shipped, so doesn't really matter because it's a motor. Either repair it, replace it, doesn't matter. These things don't cost a lot of money.
Mind you, like that sort of money for a plane, you'd want one that came with a motor that worked, wouldn't you? Because it's not cheap.
I have a few motors laying around. Should be able to get it up and running fairly quickly, but otherwise, motor magnet issues aside, it is a bloody fantastic flyer, in my opinion.
But I bet you're flying it. I bet you're flying it steady, aren't you? Most people seem to want to rip these things around the sky.
Well, the thing is, I took off, did some aerobatics like loops, rolls, whatever I could think of, like full verticals with a dead drop after that, stuff like that, that I don't usually do, but for some reason it has a vertical, that plane, and for some reason that sort of made me want to do all of that, see how it handles, and I didn't see any wing flex. It felt absolutely solid in the air, and I was absolutely fascinated how stable it is in full manual mode, no stabilization, no nothing. And the day I chose to fly it had 30 km/h constant wind, more or less, with faster gusting, and it was turbulent, and this thing was flying like a much larger plane. Really, really surprised me. And then I did, of course, test tip stall in both manual and stabilized, and it was bloody boring.
So you have a flight controller in it? You have a flight controller in it then?
Oh yeah, of course, right off the bat. And then having verified that it's not gonna tip stall on me, some clouds were hanging around, a little bit over the top of that mountain, and one thing led to another, and maiden flight turned into a cloud chase, and around 2.5-ish kilometer altitude gain, and a good distance away, all within the maiden flight.
But it does have a face that only a mother could love, doesn't it? That's my only thing with it, really. And as it's been said in the comments, you can buy 2 mini Talons, complete mini Talons, I believe, for the price of it as well. So
yeah, the Zod is much quicker.
I won't. I had a mini Talon. I kept it in a box for 2 years and then sold it off, never bothered to build it. So really, not a plane that would excite me. But this thing, I don't know what are people complaining about. I mean, I look at it, it looks good. I mean, it's not the most aerodynamic shape you could wish for in a nose, but it is useful. It is bloody useful. I absolutely love the fact that you just take it out, any camera you can think of, there's an adapter for it, and you just push it in there, and it's in there, and it's tight, and you don't have to glue, 3D print, adjust, strap, or do any sort of other shit that I normally do when I get a new plane and I start modifying it so I can fit any camera in there. And I've got 2 cameras in this one. I haven't touched anything in the nose. I just used what was provided from the factory, and you have to respect that. I mean,
you're paying
What?
You're paying for the convenience. A mini Talon, like it's a lot more work to get a mini Talon in the air once you take it out of the box than it is with the Rebel. The Rebel, it was like 5 minutes and just plug bits together, and it breaks down for transport. There are a lot of benefits. You're paying a premium for that. And what did you find about the CG? Did you have the CG in the factory position?
I think I did. Was sort of neutral, around neutral at the factory.
I moved mine back about 10 millimeters and it flew much better. I didn't have a flight controller, so it was purely through the sticks, and it flew much better about 10 mils further back than it said to have it.
Okay, so a bit nose heavy then.
Yeah, because it is quite a way forward when you look at it. It's not 30%. I usually have my CGs.
It's not. Yeah. I did notice that.
Yeah, and that unloaded the tail. So when I go from glide to power, there's very little pitching, nose up pitching, and it also seemed to require a little bit less power to stay in the air because you don't have your tail plane providing extra downforce to hold the nose up, sort of thing.
Yeah, I might try that. It did feel kind of wonky at first until I trimmed it. Then it was, overall, it was a very pleasant experience. And you are right, because it did take me a bit longer to build it, but I didn't really do any work on the plane itself. I just took some measurements, assembled all of the autopilot and FPV system outside of the plane, and just put it in there like Lego blocks or something for 5 minutes. It took me a bit to put the whole system and solder everything together, but then it took me 5 or 10 minutes to put it all in the plane. So it was pretty straightforward. The GPS location is provided. The camera mounting points are provided. I just printed some stuff for the video transmitter camera and the video transmitter mounting, and that was it. I was done.
Yeah, and the best thing of all is that if you'd crashed one of these up on the mountain, by the time you find it, it would have biodegraded and there'd just be the wiring left.
How convenient, huh? You wouldn't have to do that yourself then.
Well, they've got to be a bit careful because there's great interest when they bring out a new model, and if they're sending.
Oh yeah, Gary, you're completely right. Yeah.
Well, no.
Can you translate?
Yeah, no, I'm not falling with it. Didn't get a word of what he said.
Probably wasn't worth it anyway, was it? Really?
Yeah,
I'm sure.
I got the gist of it. But the plane is good. I mean, the plane flies good. I will try Bruce's suggestion to move the CG a bit further back. Although if he hadn't mentioned it, I probably wouldn't have bothered because it really does fly pretty well. I did have to trim it up a bit, now that I think about it, because it was nosing down a little bit. And I did notice that the CG points were a bit further forward for whatever reason. But although this thing was also supposed to carry a good amount of battery depending on your weight distribution, so as far as I know, it can easily take off with a 4S 3P lithium ion pack, which should put it well over 1 hour of flight time.
I used the 5200 4-cell on mine, and it was fine.
Yeah, and it still has a vertical. I don't remember if I put it on the scales, but whatever that weight is, with the autopilot and 2 cameras at the front and a 4S 2P lithium ion battery, which is roughly 400 grams, it still has a vertical, and it just keeps going at 11 meters a second straight up. Amazing. I mean, whatever the motor issues are, the plane is pretty good. And Zocht said they will be addressing that motor issue. They're working with Sunny Sky, as far as I understood it, and they should be shipping the new units with much better motors. Not sure if reviewers are going to get replacements, and I've got tons of motors laying around anyway. Might strap something else to it, and would have to replace the prop as well. But yeah, a good model, and I do love that plastic on the bottom. Everybody making hobby planes, FPV planes, oh my god, it probably costs 10 cents. Put that bloody thing on the bottom of these planes, because it makes a world of difference.
What plastic do you mean? I'm not with you now.
The whole bottom of the plane is covered by a plastic bit, and I've had that on the XUAV Clouds, and it's amazing. It's so simple yet so effective. It's by far the easiest way to protect the plane, rather than try and cover everything in glass fiber or Kevlar or carbon or whatever the composite materials you want to use, because not everybody can either afford or has the knowledge to do that, or the desire, me included.
Yeah.
You're assuming that I can land the right way up.
Yes, well, get the one with the,
yeah,
I want those things on the tail and on the nose.
Yeah, about I don't know about the nose, but about the tail.
Oh, yeah, man, you broke that already.
Some
Have you tried it without that?
Some tall grass, and that's what happened. And fun fact, I flew it the second flight without that piece, and honestly, I couldn't feel any difference in the behavior of the plane, with or without that thing.
I think it probably needs more vertical stabilizer area than it's got, because it does hang the tail in turns. If you're flying, it doesn't do automatically coordinated turns. You've got to use a bit of top rudder. When flying line of sight, I noticed that. You won't notice it on FPV, but flying line of sight, you'll notice that in a turn, the tail hangs lower than the nose, because there's not enough vertical stabilizer area. So that's why I'm thinking they put those subdorsals on to try and increase that area, because it is pretty, V-tails already fairly limited in terms of the vertical performance. So if you're not going to use those subfins, you probably want to put a vertical underneath, like the mini Talon.
Well, or make these out of carbon or something, like make them really strong so they wouldn't break from grazing against the grass.
They knew they were going to break, that's why they gave you a spare one.
They should be selling these pack of 5s or 10s for $1 or something.
I'd just make them out of core flute. Get some core flute, cut it to shape, heat it and bend it. No, seriously, heat it and bend it to the right shape and use that. Core flute will be far more robust, and it's only marginally heavier.
I'm not sure what that is, but
I'd
go through the trouble of doing that.
You know, the signs they make, the plastic they make, those corrugated plastic, they make the signs for real estate. Yeah. No, foam board's too weak, but you need that core flute. It's a really tough plastic.
Okay, yeah. XPS or something.
I think another name for it is Coroplast or something, depending on what country.
Yeah. It's what we all used to make spads out of back in the day. Big heavy, was it Spad on Rails was a very popular one, wasn't it? Back in the day, aging myself again.
That's why there were no TV aerials or real estate signs around where Gary lived.
No, exactly. Yeah, you might have a point. I may have also taught me more model aircraft inclined son to do the same, and he may go foraging for such items as well. local art, it's artisan stuff, isn't it? What is it they called there? They call mining for cobalt, isn't it? And that terrible stuff they do up there, the mining companies called it artisan mining. It's children in pits and back gardens, artisan mining. Anyway, Coroplast in there, Corex and Coroplast. That's right. Yes, that's it. It's good stuff, but it's fairly heavy. I'm a big Talon fan. Until the Believer came along, the big Talon was my go-to aeroplane. And these ones, at the end of the day, are only copies of that, and then they are only all copies of that US military.
It's interesting. I don't know if you watch Matt Ogborn. He has a channel called Rag the Nuts Off, and he was roundly criticising Zod's latest thing as being just basically a knockoff of the Mini Talon. And in a way, it is, but it's a slightly different market because it's almost ready to fly rather than ARF. But the thing is, there's very little innovation in the market. The V-tail is nothing new, and so everything is just a variation of something that's gone on before. So you can be critical if you want to, but I think it's just a case. Imitation is the most sincere form of flattery.
And Smooth Virus, it's a Lockheed Martin Desert Hawk. That's exactly what it was. And in fact, if we speak to the Desert Hawk and we speak to the Big Talon, they do have the fin underneath. People think it's for protecting their propeller, but I think it is for, as Bruce has alluded to, it's for helping in the turn, and giving a little more vertical tail area. To help in the turn,
because they have a very short coupled tail. I mean, it's a very short tail moment on those aircraft. So what you have got isn't working very well to start with.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, I was actually quite surprised how nimble that thing was in full manual mode. I mean, Rose loops didn't really take a lot to do it, and it could do quite a tight loop, which was also
super
impressive.
short couple, didn't it?
Yeah, wings didn't come off. So
that's always a bonus, isn't it?
It's definitely a bonus.
On the bottom, wings do not come off in loops. It's a feature, bullet point.
Yeah, absolutely.
You actually, and just one more thing before that other point. I do like the look of these new Zog. They might be a little bit ugly, but that's what makes them charming, and they are a step aside from the general rule or the norm that was with these planes. They're trying to do something different, and despite their looks, they're good flying planes that don't take tons of mobs and adjustments and cutting and gluing and probing and whatever to get them flying properly like a lot of other planes do. So I think that should also be acknowledged. Having said that, and speaking of the, wings didn't fold in a loop. Recently, I was looking for a listing over on Alibaba for an electric car, like one of those very small ones that can be registered as ATVs. And one of the selling points was like headlights are flush with the rest of the body, and that was like in bold letters, like some sort of, oh my god, look at this, they're like flush with the body, nothing sticking out like bad build quality or something. So something like that one would be wings held up in the loop. Woohoo!
Yes, absolutely.
Some people have criticized the Zod though because the foam they're using isn't as strong as a lot of other EPP or EPO, and I see they put some carbon reinforcement in, but I wonder if they've jumped on this biodegradable thing because maybe that's a cheaper foam and they can cut their manufacturing costs, because I've seen a lot of crashes and it isn't as durable as a lot of other models made from similar but not the same foam.
Could be, but then again, how the hell do you land those planes? Seriously.
Carefully.
That's not a landing. Sorry, that's not a landing. If the plane falls apart during a landing, that's not a landing.
But we take it as given that not everyone's going to do a perfect landing every time, and therefore durability is a factor in the purchase decision for most people.
Well, then you can also go down the route of the Raven, where the wings actually fly off when it hits the ground as the energy distribution method.
Well, I don't know. I have talked with them about the foam. They say it's durable enough. Lab testing has shown some tensile strength or whatnot, whatever. I don't know.
It's usually compressive strength in a bad landing that you want, not tensile.
It doesn't matter. I don't know. I'm not into all of that, so I'm not familiar with the terminology, but I got a reply of something like that. I'm pretty happy with it. I've crashed the Dart a few times. I had, on the first flight, I miscalculated the remaining battery I had, so I had to land sideways in some tall grass, hence the broken fin piece. But nothing nothing, like not a scratch on it.
Apart from the slight bend. The big Talon. I don't know how high up in the world you live, but what I did find with the short wings on the big Talon, if you get it heavy, is it does land fast. And that just made me think of this landing conversation that we're having now. I found the big wing. I can't remember what size. I think it takes it to 2.4 meters. I think, if I remember rightly. With the extensions, and the only trouble with those big Talons is the weight. I don't know whether they changed it, but the weight of the main spar was like 500 kilos. It was the heaviest main spar in the world. It was a solid whatever it was.
Told you a million times, don't exaggerate.
Yeah. Well, I'm not very strong. No, it's super heavy. It's super heavy, the spar. So if you can replace that with a bit of carbon fiber, then you'd be much better off. It's to save yourself. You'll slow down your landing speed dramatically, rather than fit. For us, see people were fitting extra flaps. Do this, do that, do this to the wing. Like, no, get rid of that. Get rid of that big heavy spar. You know. I don't know what it's made. I've got one hanging around here, but you get nice solid sound if you tap it against the floor. Nice solid ring to it. Yeah, built for strength and quality. Maybe they've changed them to carbon fiber now. Yeah, they weren't. The original ones weren't, and they were really heavy. I've got 3 of the things. So I love them. I think they're very, very, very good. And I don't fly them anywhere near as much as I should do, but they're very, very nice things, the big ones. And I haven't tried the mini Talon. I must try one of those, but it sounds like I'm being pulled towards this Zoch stuff. But
my mini Talon has a pulse jet on it, so that's all you need for super silent FPV.
Absolutely. And what's happened?
Yeah,
where's that pulse jet?
Just waiting for the right weather. The right weather, the right people, the right frame of mind, and a new fire extinguisher.
That's probably the thing that's most needed.
The last one would be most important, yeah.
And the original ones did have those goofy-looking side wheels. You're exactly right. The Smooth Virus, yes. And I had some of the really, really original ones. So yes, it's a good airplane. But the Believer, but now I must say the Believer is absolutely. I just love the Believer. It's going to go a long way to beat that. But speaking to beating that, or another aircraft and the thing, I asked Nicola before we started if he'd seen a thing. I'll put it in the main comments. For some reason, this thing from Sonic Model popped into my. I'm going to put it in the comments now. Popped into my inbox, and
Sonic Model, Zocht, it's all the same. It's the same.
Oh, is it?
Yeah, Zocht is a sub-brand of Sonic Model.
Oh, so it's those very people that are bringing us this thing with the jaunty Coast Guard sort of look and the word rescue on the side. But apparently it's got a mapping. It's got some tray in there for mapping. And you're going to get one to review, aren't you?
Yeah.
Oh, don't you go all Jonathan with me with your single answers. So what
more can I say? I found out about this plane today.
Oh, okay. Okay,
yeah.
Me too.
Yeah.
So
shortly after I found out I'm going to be getting one, and supposedly it's got a lot more parts and it's a lot more fiddly to put together. So fewer people are going to get review units, something like that.
Oh, it's not letting me post the link in the comments. Why don't you let me post the link in the comments?
Because YouTube sucks.
Something like that. Well, it's the Sonic Model binary, and it's 1.2 meters. Sonic Model binary. How can I get rid of some of this link? And that's what it is. Well, that's not quite the. Maybe that'll work. It's not quite the entire link, but maybe that'll work. Yeah. So yeah. Well, when do you think you'll get a hold of it, Nicola?
No idea.
No idea.
Absolutely no idea yet.
I'll be very interested in seeing what camera can fit in there. And it reminds me of that. Was it Graupner? Someone had an FPV ship in the early like 2010, 2011, 2012 that had a funny old big canopy like that for putting your. It was twin engined as well for putting your camera gear, your FPV gear.
Canair something.
I can't remember. It was an old thing. I don't. It was a multiplexal Gruppner made it. Just take a belly lander. Yeah, hopefully that link will work. Yeah, definitely take off the gear. That's not going to last very long, is it? And I'm not very sure about the 3-bladed props either. I'm not sure about that. Just tells me that there's not enough room to put a big enough 2-bladed prop on there.
Depends on where you're going to be landing.
The ground?
Well,
yeah, yes. I think
surface kind of.
No, not the Twin Star smooth virus. I had a Twin Star. I love the Twin Star. Let's see if I can find it. It was I love the Twin Star. That was a great model. In fact, mine is still flying. We wouldn't have called it FPV back then, would we? We would have called it a camera plane. Do you know the one? Can you think of the one I'm talking about, Bruce?
No idea. Wasn't a Death Star.
No, not a Death Star. No, it was they had a big, very big bobbly canopy and little wheels and twin engined and I'll think about it and try and remember it for next week. There's a Twin Star coming up in my search. I'm making this all go off topic, aren't I? Which must mean it's probably time to go. Have you seen anything else that's really caught your eye this week, Brucey?
I think we covered most of it all here, actually. Yeah, that's really about it.
Yeah, I reckon it is. Well, I will. I'll leave you all to work out what on earth I'm talking about. I think is it a multiplex? Oh no, let's find out now. No. We're talking about 10 years ago. At very least, it was twin engined. Which was it? Not the Easy. It was of the Easy Star ilk. Easy Star. Oh, there it is. Right. Movie Star. That's what it was. Right. Let's see if this plane's still coming. Movie Star. Right. I should put it in the comments.
That's the first time I'm hearing of this.
It was a long time ago, back when Pontius was a pilot. It had the little brushed motors and the little tiny multiplex propellers. When men were men and sheep were nervous. Did I put it in the right thing? Multiplex Movie Star. That was also 1.4. It's going to be the same specifications. This new thing's just a brushless version of it.
Could be.
Yeah, with those.
It was like a Bantam microlight with 2 motors.
Yes, exactly. That's that sort of a thing. That's when design capable of carrying a still or video camera, modern digital picture technology has produced affordable, lightweight cameras, and these are ideal for taking aloft. Back in the day. Yeah, no, I bought the Twin Star instead of that, which is basically the same thing. Anyway, on that bombshell, the new flight controllers. Yes, I did see that. That does look very tidy, very small. It was quite expensive, wasn't it? Mad RC. I'm just clicking the link now. Yeah, $350. But yeah, that MR Control Zero does look very, very tidy, and as you say, very small. Bit of a premium price.
Just the thing for my sub 250 builds, eh? And I'm really going to push this sub 250 now. I think it's going to be a major part of the hobby. And you're saying about how the regulators will clamp down; they'll just bring the ceiling down. Well, the thing is, they can't, because once you get below a certain point, then every plastic cheesy toy that comes out of China becomes something that the parents will have to register in the UK, and the kids will have to get a flyer's license for. And it comes to the point where you just look so stupid that you don't do that, because even the politicians have a barrier, a threshold beyond which they cannot exceed in terms of stupidity.
Well,
Greed has a way of
Australia's
wow.
100 grams. It's 100 grams in Australia, so they're already. But
But that 100 grams is for the regulations to apply. But with registration in Australia, it's still 250 when the registration comes in.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. No, that does look like a very tiny controller. We'll have to get to Geordie on here. He can tell us about it. It does look very tiny, and I think it's triple IMU as well, isn't it? And all those other good things. Yes,
that would surely be designed for a sub 250 gram market, because what is the point in, I mean, the current ones, the 20 by 20s are small enough and light enough. You're going to be saving what? It's probably going to be what, 40%, 30% of the weight. Really, you're saving a couple of grams. Is that going to make that much difference? And in terms of size, it really, you can't fit it into a model because it's 20 mils wide instead of 16 mils wide or something. I think it's a solution looking for a problem at the moment, isn't it? Especially at that price.
Well, I mean, look at the connectors of the thing there. The connectors probably weigh 2 or 3 times more than the than the board and the electronics. But look, it's a very tidy solution with the triple IMU and all that. Be good news in a helicopter. Not going to have to add some damping in there. And as FX knows, I think prefer to pay less for something bigger. Yeah, F4H7. Yeah, it's a tidy, no denying it's a tidy controller for those that have the money and the use for it. Yeah, what does it weigh? Does it tell us what it weighs? Does it tell us what it weighs? It goes down, goes down, goes down. 5.3 grams. Goodness me.
Okay, but $350. Come on.
Yeah. That is a bit of an issue, isn't it? When the controller is next to it.
It's like, see, there's interesting things going on with FreeSky and Jumper and that in the radio market, isn't he? Seeing the new FreeSky transmitter, their little light one, which is not backwards compatible with all the existing receivers and things. I think FreeSky are trying to knock out the copiers, because the new protocol I've got actually has encryption. And they say it's not to protect your transmission, but there's no reason to have encryption except to protect your protocol, really. I haven't heard of people being hacked with their FreeSky systems. I think FreeSky is starting to feel the pain from the likes of Jumper, and because they've also put the word on dealers, if you sell Jumper, you can't sell FreeSky. So there's a lot of stuff going on. There's the battles of the companies going on, and FreeSky trying to not protect anyone but themselves. They're rolling out this new protocol, which is Access, which is encrypted, so it'll be much harder for other companies to produce compatible receivers or equipment. I think FreeSky is feeling the pain, and they might have just dropped the ball with this new set, because it's kind of chintzy, and it's coming in at, well, it was $59 as the introductory price, but it's probably going to end up costing, not much less than the QX7, but it's really a basic bottom level transmitter with a lot of compromises. Exciting times ahead.
With that encryption, it'd be quite good for remote ID and all what people want for the standards for that. If you send down the positions as well.
Yeah, but what's the benefit to the flyer? I mean, I don't think if you're going to be using something that's going to be at the level you want remote ID, you're not going to be using a $59 transmitter on it. And
true, that's true.
And that, I think there may be more you can actually add the access, I think, to some of the other transmitters. But also, I want to know, as a protocol, what does it offer? Well, it offers 24 channels, which is do we really need to? I've never used 16, let alone 24. And I think they're trying to sell it on the basis this is good for you, when in reality it is this is good for us. And I'm a little bit cautious of that kind of marketing.
And explain to me the thing going on with OpenTX and TBS. You're probably aware of what that is. I'm not. I'm
not totally up to speed. I think some people are concerned that OpenTX has got a very close relationship with FreeSky. It's come up over the Jumper thing as well, because Jumper have used what they're calling it. I think FreeSky referred to it as a blatant copy of their OpenTX. They've just taken the OpenTX and they've taken the guts out of the Horus 10X and they've just made it into the Jumper TX. That's what sort of kicked a lot of this off. And I know that some other companies trying to deal with OpenTX have got a very slow rate of progress because they don't want to compromise the deal with FreeSky. So I suspect there's stuff like that going on. It's supposed to be open source, but it's some things are more open source than others, and it's kind of messy. And I think it's time for something completely new. FreeSky's had a good run. Maybe someone will come out with something completely new and we'll start all over.
Maybe. Maybe, yeah. I'm a little bit behind in getting my new digital gimbals and switch covers and this and that and all the other stuff that I see people rushing to buy. I'm a little bit out of date with all of that.
The Hall effect neck straps. The one thing you're going to have that Hall effect neck strap.
That'll be it. That'll be it. Absolutely. Yeah, I probably would be thrown off an established model flying field for not having enough bling of various sorts on all my gear. Yes, very, very interesting. And the big screen radios, have you got any of those coming in for review? Because there's quite a few of those kicking about there now. That's quite exciting, isn't it?
What do you mean by big screen? Like the new DJI controller?
Well, the ones with anodized flight knobs, exactly. FX node. I haven't got any of that. And the ones with so you can run. You can have your like ground control station on the radio itself. I can't think of the big names and things. But I see a few of them kicking about.
Yeah, sort of the ground control stuff is not where I'm at. I'm more interested in, because that's one thing that's put me off ArduPilot, is that everyone I've seen flying ArduPilot has this tablet with all this telemetry connection, and they're constantly looking back at, oh yes, and then it says IMU bloody unsafe or something. I'm thinking, I just want to fly. If I want to play with the simulator, I'll go home on the computer. I want to fly. These things here are my main control system. I don't need tablets and all that sort of stuff. And it's just not the aspect of the hobby that I'm that interested in. And I don't want to be drawn into spending the rest of my life flicking switches instead of flying models.
Yeah, no, fair enough. So maybe maybe I'll get more excited about that than you would. FX nodes, the DJI cameras coming tomorrow. Somebody got hacked, didn't they, today? One of the reviewers got hacked, and I haven't bothered looking. They're out in a while, but yes, it is an action camera, and yes, it does have a forward-facing screen. And well, actually, I meant to keep a tab open with all that I found today. Oops, I've closed the tab. Thank goodness for history. And it's what I believe waterproof.
It'll be interesting to see whether DJI is more capable in the action camera market than GoPro was in the drone market.
I think there will be. I think there's no doubt about it, and I think it'll be a very, very tidy product, and it'll probably be full of little surprises. And GoPro had their chance. DJI wanted to work with them. They said no way, or not. They wanted stupid money to work with them, didn't they? And now they're going to have a complete kick in the nuts, I think, which is I think is fine, absolutely fine. I don't know. What do you guys think?
Well, I certainly hope the new Spark's under 250 grams.
And tell me again, where did you hear about this new Spark? There's been
a few rumors that's going around that the new Spark is nearly ready for release. And I mean, if you think about it, DJI could really scoop the market if they did that. It'd be like registration-free drones, It's
got to happen by Christmas, hasn't it? It's got to be the Christmas release. If they're going to do it, it will be a Christmas release. And it's the same reason everyone keeps going, the Phantom 5, the Phantom 5. Didn't we hear 2 years ago that they cancelled the Phantom series? I think we did. And they've stopped the 4s. It's only the 4 Pro and RTK one I think you can get now. But you'd be nuts. You'd be nuts to make one. You can have 4 sub 250 Sparks for the price of or the weight of one Phantom. It'd be nuts.
And if you look at it, a lot of people now have shifted from Phantom to Mavic because it's a more utilitarian craft for actual video work. You don't have the props in the field of view and all that sort of stuff. The Phantom is an old generation design. It might be good if you want to put something on top like they've got that one with the mapping thing and that sort of crap. Yeah. But for actually doing aerial video, the Mavic even the Spark is a far more versatile vehicle.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And thank goodness Blue flies. Go
on. I'm missing Louis. He was the parrot and Effie. Where's Louis today?
He is taking up a new job and he's in Switzerland. Is where he is. I can tell you where he is. He's in Switzerland. In the UK, there's a company called Costain. They're an engineer. I probably said that wrong. I think my brother used to work for them. They build stuff, engineers and all that sort of thing. And they have just started using the Parrot and Affy exclusively. They have stopped using DJI products because of the data security issues that lie within. And they made a statement about that today, but they won't internally, which I heard about, but they won't tell me externally. So,
if only DJI and Huawei could get together, they'd own everything.
Imagine, I mean, imagine joining the dots like that. Yeah. Yes. I wonder if you're onto something there. It's interesting, isn't it, how the Huawei thing, I guess because it's cell phones, it becomes easily top of mind and people are really concerned about it, but they can't think that any other products might share the same properties.
Well, interesting that Cisco have announced that there's been a major security flaw on all their routers, the trusted American brand Cisco, and that they can be backdoored so easily because of a fault in the security system in them. And then we have things like that what's that product that Facebook bought that has been dropping malware onto phones and things? Yeah, I mean, like, is there a difference between intentional vulnerabilities and unintentional? If it's vulnerable, it's vulnerable, and everything is vulnerable. So you can't trust. There's no such thing as trusted systems. I mean, you've got to assume that everything is untrustworthy, and it's your policies and your procedures that protect you. I mean, I don't run antivirus on my computer, and I'm not worried about it. And I don't run the patches that will give me protection from Spectre and Meltdown, because that computer, the computer I don't have that on, I don't use it on the internet. That's the best protection you can get.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And just in case I didn't say it, Blue Flyer's here now, so we can start. He says, don't worry, guys, he's here. So we're all right now. Blue Flyer's here, so we're okay. So that is probably actually now our cue to go. Now that he's arrived, best we go. So, dear viewers, wherever you might be in the world, there's a ranty ramble one. You have heard that we may very well be having someone from the CAA coming on board. There's a couple of other people from different regulators that I've been fishing around to try and get on to get some responses from, and they may come on. So,
anyone from D-Drone? Come on, where's the D-Drone people?
Yeah. They seem to love us less after I said, Bruce, it's not my fault. It's not me, it's you. Yeah, they don't love us so much. But yeah, I'll try again with them. And well, we'll see what happens. So, Nicola, I must ask before we go, has the snow melted?
Almost. Well, but there's still a good amount up there, but I haven't been up to that eastern facing slope to see what the conditions are there, because it's not visible from our flying location or from anywhere in the city. And
Mad Arsie, look, I'm playing with a 35 megs antenna here. I just happen to have one in my hand, as if by magic. Mad RC Plexi drone, that is also being looked into, and that is also one of the future guests. That future guest is currently on holiday in Sweden, and so that's why he couldn't join us tonight. But yeah, that and other crowd-funded scandals is what he'll come and talk to us about. Unfortunately, there is no resolution to Plexi drone. I don't know why. I don't know what's happened, but I've had 4 or 5 emails in the last 2 weeks about it. So I don't know whether something else has happened in the court case or whatever. But sadly, I think those people have lost their money. But with that, for the last time, Lily Drone. Well, that's again another story. That's the review thing I just did. But anyway, with that, we must go. Have a lovely rest of the week, everybody. Look after yourselves. And we'll see you again in 2100 GMT next week with one of those people, I hope. Cheers, guys. Thanks, Nicola. Thanks, Bruce. Look after yourselves, guys. Cheers, everyone. Bye bye.